Exterior various aerial shots of forest. We hear a somber feminine voice.
Once there was a good sorcerer named Theophan who prolonged their life, for they knew all the secrets of death. But despite all of their wisdom they could not conquer death, and succumbed to mortality.
Title card, Aria of Lament. Exterior forest path. Day overcast. A young woman dressed in dark colors walks along a forest path lined with trees on both sides.
Theophan had a love named Eliezer who pored through all of the secret writings kept by the deceased until she found a means by which she could resurrect her love.
Alessa has a sack with a wooden shovel hanging from her shoulder.
She imbued the essence of the dead sorcerer into the form of an egg.
As she comes closer we see an indigo egg hanging round her neck.
Yet in order to complete the resurrection she would need to travel to an ancient cursed forest to find a spring that was said to contain the very essence of life itself.
Exterior forest. Day. Old rotted trees. A flowing brook. Exterior riverbed. Day. Alessa reaches a dried-up riverbed. She squats and looks around, then down to the egg. She takes it in her hand and raises it up to eye level. She stares at it for a moment, then closes her eyes and holds it to her chest. A moment passes and she stands. She looks up and takes a few tepid steps forward, then starts to sprint along the riverbed. Exterior edge of field. Day overcast. Alessa reaches a field and stops running, catches her breath and looks around. She marches forward into the field. We see a wide side shot of her walking across the screen left to right. Exterior forest path. Late afternoon. The sun hangs low in the sky. A dying woman with a slit throat and a knife in her chest lays on the ground, eyes bulging. She coughs up blood and looks into the camera.
Please.
A man with a boyish face stands over her looking sullen. A well-dressed man petting a horse yells to him,
"Check her abuser."
Abuser glances over to the man, then bends down and rips open the woman's dress, revealing a few coins. The woman struggles and grabs Abuser. She locks eyes with him. A gruff-looking man holding a bloody knife shoves Abuser aside.
"What the fuck are you doing?"
Danton stabs the woman a few more times with his knife, then pulls the knife from her chest and hands it to Abuser. Another rough-looking man approaches.
"Lay off him, Danton. Have you ever seen a dead body before, Abuser?"
Abuser hesitantly glances at Tavel, who is tall, well-built, with kind eyes, wearing a breastplate and gauntlets. He's obviously the muscle of the group.
Yes, of course I have.
A thin man with sharp features finishes strangling the body of a well-dressed man, then cackles at Abuser.
"You don't have to lie to us. I remember my first time. It went south just like this."
"This didn't go south. It's better this way."
Danton wipes his blade on the woman's cheeks, then moves the knife down to her breasts and cuts open her shirt.
"Could still have some fun with her."
Danton licks his lips. The handsome, well-dressed man feeds the horse an apple.
"No one's in the mood to watch you fuck a corpse, Danton."
Danton shoots Sasha an annoyed glance. Two other men come running up from the distance, one younger, one older. Sasha approaches them.
"Their other horse?"
The younger one catches his breath.
"It got away."
Callan, the older one, surveys the scene, noting the dead woman covered in blood.
"Sasha, we gotta get out of here, that blood's gonna attract them."
Sasha nods.
Hey, Sasha.
Abuser is looking in the saddlebags on the horse. He reaches inside and holds a handful of gold coins. Sasha smiles at Abuser. An inhuman wail echoes through the trees. Everyone freezes. Sasha draws his sword and scans the area. On the path stands a large creature, draped in shadow and a ragged cloak. It has red glowing eyes. Sasha approaches it and slashes. It grabs the blade in its hand and howls at Sasha. Danton pulls out his knife and rushes to help Sasha. Sasha breaks away and jumps back as Danton slams into the creature. Sasha looks behind him. Abuser is riding off on the horse. Sasha glares as the rest of the group run past him to fight the creature. Exterior ancient grove. Late afternoon. On her knees under a big tree, Alessa digs. She unearths an old chest filled with vials and magical trinkets. She takes 2 small ancient-looking vases, a book made of flesh, and a blue stirring rod. She packs up the objects into her knapsack and places the chest back into the ground, covering it up with dirt. Exterior riverbed. Early evening. Alessa arrives at a dried-up riverbed. She looks around, unsure of where to go. She holds the egg to her chest. The indigo egg hums.
Theophan. What is it?
A branch breaks from behind her. She turns around. In front of her is a medium-sized creature covered in fur with red eyes. It doesn't move. Alessa grasps the egg in her hand and raises it up to eye level. She stares at the creature, then closes her eyes. The egg hums louder. The creature slowly turns its head east. Alessa, eyes still closed, also turns east. She opens her eyes, glances back at the creature. It looks back at Alessa, then takes a few tepid steps backward before it runs away. Alessa glances at the egg, then east. Exterior pillow shots forest. Dusk. The last ebbing light shines on white trees, on trees in decay, on insects crawling on the ground. Exterior forest hill. Dusk. Alessa walks up a hill and notes the darkening sky. She begins to walk faster when she hears a cry. She stops and looks around. Exterior hanging tree. Dusk. Ein, a young man in fancy but tattered clothing, hangs upside down from a tree, hands tied behind his back. His eyes are closed, as if meditating. He takes a deep breath and then opens his eyes and lets out a yell as he tries to free his hands. No good. He closes his eyes again and prepares to try again when he hears a noise. He looks around.
So you've come back to finish me off, have you?
Ein sees Alessa holding a knapsack. Indigo egg hung round her neck.
Oh, thank heaven. I thought my end had come. Help me down, please. I was walking through these woods when a group of fiends robbed me and left me for dead.
Alessa eyes Ein with suspicion, then walks past him at a hurried pace.
No. Have pity. Have mercy. Cut me down, please. I'm just a poor lost merchant and...
She doesn't slow down.
Stop, please. My name is Yaen.
She stops but doesn't turn around.
Not many travel through this forest. Are you lost?
Alessa keeps walking.
I can help you. I know every nook of these woods. Please, I'll do anything.
Alessa turns around and approaches, drawing a knife from under her cloak. She crouches down and puts the knife to Ein's throat, looks into his deep eyes.
My name is Elisa.
Ein gives Alessa a serious look.
You're not trying to trick me, are you, Ein?
Ein smiles awkwardly and shakes his head. Alessa stands and cuts the rope round Ein's feet. She studies him for a moment. A softness creeps into her eyes, but she catches it, then walks away. Ein lays on the ground a moment before realizing his hands remain bound. He summons his strength and runs after Alessa.
And my hands, please.
Ein overtakes Alessa, who turns around just as Ein stumbles and falls into her arms. Alessa catches Ein, who looks up at his savior. They share an awkward moment. Alessa leans in, almost like she wants to kiss Ein, but cuts the rope binding Ein's hands instead, letting him fall to his knees. Alessa turns and continues on her way.
Thank you, gracious Alessa. You've saved my life. Anything you need, I am at your service.
Alessa ignores Ein. Ein watches her go.
Nice to meet you too.
Exterior unpleasant forest. Dusk. Alessa walks alone, holding the egg close, a determined look on her face. Exterior thick unpleasant forest. Night full moon. Alessa walks through dense forest with some effort. She struggles past thorns and arrives at a clearing. Exterior grove/monster nest. Continuous. She looks around, unsure of which way to go. She notices a humanoid shape, hunched over something at the edge of the clearing. She draws her blade and slowly approaches. The creature stands up and drops the body of the dead woman. It turns to Alessa and looks at her with red eyes. It lets out a wail and charges. Alessa slashes at it, but it hits the blade out of her hand and grabs her by the throat, lifting her off the ground. It brings Alessa close to its mouth and shrieks in her face. Alessa heaves and looks around for the blade. She spots it at the corner of the grove. Alessa kicks the creature in the stomach and it lets go of her, sending her to the ground. She scrambles towards the blade. The creature turns towards Alessa and lets out another shriek. Alessa almost reaches the blade when a hand snatches it. She looks up at Ein, holding the blade. Creature's POV as it charges towards the pair. Ein readies the blade. The creature slams into Ein and grabs him. Ein plunges the blade into the creature's chest twice. The creature lets go and makes a wounded cry, then stumbles off to the right into the thicket. Ein and Alessa move into the center of the clearing. Dark green blood drips from the blade. Alessa stands up. Ein starts to walk backwards, eyeing the dark forest.
We're in its nest. On the count of 3 run. 1, 2, 3.
Ein grabs Alessa's hand and makes a run for it. Exterior rocky area. Night full moon. Alessa and Ein stop running and attempt to catch their breath. Wheezing, Ein goes and sits on a rock.
Okay, I think that's far enough.
Ein feels his stomach. It's bloody.
Damn it. Are you alright, Alessa?
My arm is bleeding, but
Those creatures are poisonous, even a small scratch. We need Eve's bane, it's a mushroom.
Ein stands up.
I know Eve's bane. Stay here and make a fire. Give me my blade.
Ein looks at the blade for a moment, then up to Alessa, back to the blade. Ein flips it around and hands it to Alessa. She looks at Ein for a beat, then walks up and takes the blade and leaves. Ein eyes Alessa. Exterior rocky area. Later, Ein is finishing creating a rock circle to hold wood in as well as dry grass and leaves. Alessa returns with several mushrooms. She hands one to Ein, who pops it in his mouth. He chews, then takes out some flint and begins to start the fire.
Yum. A meal fit for a king.
Alessa sits down across from Ein and looks in her knapsack. Ein stealthily spits the mushroom into his hand and pockets it.
How are you feeling?
Well, the fever has started and I feel like I might vomit, but hopefully these delicious mushrooms will counteract all of that.
They're bitter, but it's better than dying.
Ein coughs.
So tell me something, what brings you to this forest? Alessa, was it?
What sort of wares do you sell?
What?
You said you worked as a merchant.
Did I? Well, that's not exactly true.
Ein makes a large spark and the fire starts. Ein grabs a few sticks, then stands and looks at Alessa.
I apologize.
Ein snaps the wood in half and tosses it on the fire. Alessa shrugs.
You don't trust me.
Ein chuckles.
To tell the truth, it was my lover who did that to me. I stood up to her, had a moment of self-respect, and she thought I deserved to get eaten.
Ein sits down.
By one of those creatures.
Alessa picks up some more wood and puts it on the fire, then sits next to Ein.
How charming. Your lover controls you and you obey or get tossed aside.
She takes out some bread from her sack, rips it, offers a piece to Ein, who reaches out to take it. Their fingers briefly touch, sending pulses of electricity through both of them. They both feel it but try not to show it. Alessa bites the bread and subconsciously shifts closer to Ein. Ein sets the bread aside.
And now that you know my plight, what of yours?
Alessa finishes chewing and leans forward.
Do you know of a cave in these woods?
There are many in this forest.
The one I'm looking for has a spring in it, of emerald green.
Oh, yes, I know it. It's about a 4-hour walk.
Ein makes a horizontal arch with his arm and finger.
That way.
Ein winces and grabs his stomach.
Which, coincidentally, is the opposite way of the way you are going.
The sun will come up in a few hours.
Alessa looks at Ein's lips. He notices. This makes her look away.
You will take me to the cave.
Alessa stands up and lays on a blanket on the ground on the other side of the fire. There's an awkward beat. Ein looks at Alessa's knapsack, notes that it contains strange pictures and a book bound in some sort of flesh. Ein glances at Alessa, who's turned away from him. Ein studies the book and contemplates it for a moment, then lays down and shivers before closing his eyes. Alessa thinks to herself, looks at the egg, feels cold, turns, gazes over at Ein. She wants him. Exterior fire. Later. The knapsack rests undisturbed. Ein looks at it and carefully sits up. He starts to move towards it when he notices Alessa, standing in the moonlight, holding the egg, gazing up to the sky. She turns to Ein, a curious expression on her face. Alessa walks toward him, graceful and slow, then bends down and the pair embrace, a passionate and sad kiss. Ein brings Alessa down and turns her so she's on the ground below him. He looks into her eyes, they appear somber and expressionless. Ein lowers his gaze to Alessa's mouth and slowly leans in for another kiss. He stops inches from her mouth. He looks up from her mouth, unsure if they should continue. Alessa pushes her lips against Ein, who responds with a passion deeply rooted in a despair and hope that this moment and feeling could last. Something breaks in Alessa, tears stream down her cheeks. Ein kisses her face as the tears wet his mouth. Alessa looks away, ashamed to show this kind of emotion. Ein kisses her ear softly while lightly caressing the hair on her neck. She wraps her arms around him and holds him close, kissing his cheek. She turns him so he's below her now. She's smiling, tears drip onto Ein's face. She caresses his mouth and cheek before leaning in and kissing his forehead as she begins to take off his shirt. Exterior rocky area. Night. Later. Clouds drift across the sky, the fire burns bright. The pair lay naked next to each other. Dream sequence. Continuous. Alessa hangs upside down at the hanging tree. Her hands bound, eyes closed. Silence. Alessa opens her eyes with a loud gasp. She lets out a yell but no noise escapes her lips. We drift away from Alessa to reveal Ein, back turned. Ein turns around, Alessa stands before him, hands bound. She raises her hands, slow like a prayer. Ein lifts the knife and cuts through the rope, then lets the knife slide out of his hand. Tears of black blood stream down Alessa's face. Ein, whose eyes have turned red, takes Alessa's head in his hands and kisses her forehead. Alessa, now holding the knife in the palms of her hands, offers it to Ein. He looks at it then plunges it into his chest. The pair both hang from the tree covered in blood. Exterior rocky area. Morning. Ein wakes with a slight start. Alessa is packing up her bag. The fire has died. Ein sits up. Alessa ignores Ein. Her demeanor seems cold, like when they first met. She finishes packing and walks in the direction of the spring. Ein watches and thinks for a moment about the emotion Alessa showed last night, and about the dream. Exterior pleasant forest. Day overcast. Ein and Alessa walk in silence.
How old are you?
What?
We look about the same age.
I'm sure we are.
Alessa glances at Ein.
Have you ever loved anyone, Alessa?
Alessa looks away and clutches the egg.
What?
Have you ever been in love?
Alessa snaps at Ein.
Why would you ask that?
The thought just came into my head.
Do you say every thought that comes into your head?
Ein glances at Alessa and clears his throat.
Yes, I have been in love.
Are you still in love?
Do you always ask these kinds of questions?
I just thought.
Alessa stops but doesn't look at Ein.
Don't make me regret cutting you down, Ein.
Are you though?
What?
Still in love?
Alessa ignores Ein and keeps walking. Ein follows.
Can I ask you a question?
There's a beat of silence. Ein starts to say something but Alessa stops and turns around.
How about we play a game?
What kind?
You stay quiet unless I say something to you.
You must be a lot of fun at parties.
Yes, I am. How did you know?
Ein smirks a little. Exterior. Forest pillow shots. Day. A rabbit eats some clover. A deer drinks from a stream. Exterior downward forest path. Day overcast. Alessa is walking at a brisk pace.
Ein, hurry up.
She turns around. No Ein.
Ein.
Silence. A cold wind howls through the trees. Alessa looks in the opposite direction. A branch breaks.
These flowers only grow in this part of the forest.
Ein holds them out.
Ein.
She smacks them out of his hand.
We don't have time for this. Which way?
It's this way.
Ein walks ahead. Alessa feels bad. She looks down at the flowers and picks one up, smells it, then puts it in her hair. Exterior forest brook. Day. Ein and Alessa reach a brook. There's a log across it. Alessa starts to cross first. Ein watches, worried.
Could you stop?
What?
You think I'm going to fall?
No, I don't.
Alessa stops and turns around.
I think we should make something clear between us, Ein. Last night, it doesn't change.
Alessa takes a step towards Ein. She slips. Ein jumps up and tries to grab her. They both fall into the water. Alessa glares at Ein for a moment. Ein is wide-eyed. They both burst out laughing. Alessa notices Ein has a cut on his hand.
You've hurt yourself.
Trying to save you.
Alessa kisses the cut, then looks up at Ein. Ein reaches up and touches Alessa's face with the cut hand and leans forward. Alessa does too. They kiss. As the kissing becomes more passionate, Alessa realizes something.
Where is it?
She bolts up and looks around, frantic. Ein stands up. He is holding the egg.
Here, it broke off when you.
Alessa snatches it and turns away from Ein. Her eyes well up with tears as she ties it back on. Alessa stands and hurries forward. Ein follows but pauses for a moment as he notices the flower on the ground. He picks it up. Exterior cave. Day overcast. The pair walk in an awkward silence. Ein sees the cave entrance.
Alessa,
Someone is singing inside the cave.
Calling you wonderful lover of mine.
Ein and Alessa both look toward the sound.
Calling you forever towards this shrine.
A beautiful creature walks out of the mouth.
Shine now the willow and take all that is.
She notices Ein.
Hello, Trice.
Trice marches towards Ein and slugs him hard across the jaw, knocking him down.
I thought I told you I never wanted to see you again.
Trice, listen to me.
No, you listen to me, Ein. I'm sick and tired of. Who is this?
Alessa and Trice look at each other. There's a moment between them.
Elisa.
You've come here because you've lost someone.
Yes.
Ein stands up.
Alessa, this is Trice. Trice, this is.
Alessa. Come with me.
Trice offers her hand, never breaking eye contact. Alessa takes it and is led into the cave. Trice hums her song. Interior cave. Day. Trice leads Alessa inside the cave, which is decorated with a tattered bed, a makeshift shelf, an old chest, a wooden table, and some patchwork curtains along the walls. Trice lets go of Alessa but keeps humming.
The spring.
Trice continues humming and spins around smiling, a big grin. She raises her hands up and looks at Alessa. Alessa's eyes start to droop a little, then she raises her hands to mirror Trice. Trice spins and Alessa does so too. The pair come in close. Trice kisses Alessa's hand, then turns her around and tilts her head and bites down on her exposed neck. Alessa goes wide-eyed, reaches for her blade and holds it out to stab backward. A hand grabs Alessa's wrist. It's Ein, who squeezes Alessa's wrist till the blade drops. Ein catches it with his other hand, then brings it up and slices Alessa's wrist. Ein drops the blade and holds out Alessa's arm, then sucks on the wound. Alessa lets out a cry but gets cut short as Trice slices open a carotid artery on her throat with a sharp thumbnail. Alessa tries to stop the bleeding as the pair bring her down to the floor. They feed on her. Alessa's legs kick then go limp. Trice comes up, blood dripping down her chin. She stands and walks away from the scene.
This almost makes me want to forgive you.
Ein stops feeding and looks up at Trice. Alessa plunges her blade into Ein's throat. Ein grabs Alessa's bleeding wrist and snaps it. Alessa screams and looks away. Ein looks down at his victim, remorseful. Alessa stares at Ein. Tears stream down Alessa's face. With her other hand she tears the necklace off and holds it out to Ein.
The spring.
Alessa starts to cough and spit blood. Trice walks over and leans in, taking the egg. She looks at it, then at Alessa. She smiles and crushes the egg, spilling black ooze onto the dirt. Alessa yells and coughs up more blood. Ein takes the blade out and backs away, clutching his neck. Alessa writhes and musters all her strength to roll over and crawl on her stomach toward the black ooze. She reaches it and begins to shovel it into her mouth, swallowing as much of it as she can.
You're making me lose my appetite.
Trice flips Alessa over and puts her hands over Alessa's face and makes a soothing sound. Trice brings Alessa up and kisses her mouth. Blood spills out. Trice pulls away slowly, then smashes Alessa's head into the ground. Trice grins. With a firm grip, Trice pushes Alessa's eyes until blood gushes out. Trice looks at Ein, then smiles and breaks Alessa's neck. Exterior wooden log. Day overcast. Some years prior. The camera looks down the dirt path. We hear the sound of the struggled breathing of one quickly approaching death. We slowly pan over to Ein, leaning against a wooden log. He's wearing brown merchant clothing with a hat. He's bloody, claw marks on his face, chest, and neck. As we move in closer, he looks up to someone. Trice stares at the dying young man. She slowly lifts her arm and cuts her wrist, then holds it out to him as she kneels down. He turns his head from her. She reassures him, giving him soft kisses on his face, his eyelids, and then his lips. As she kisses his neck, she holds up her wrist again and he starts to drink. Exterior wood log. Present. An old woman sits on the log and contemplates this memory till the sound of whistling in the distance breaks her away from her thoughts. Exterior wooded dirt path. Day overcast. Abuser walks along a dirt path looking disheveled. He sighs and tepidly whistles. He finishes a verse and trails off as his walking slows. He looks around, uncertainty creeps over his face. He glances back the way he came, thinks for a second and remembers something, then jaunts forward. A raspy voice cries out up ahead.
Oh curses! Why today of all days?
Exterior wood log. Continuous. Abuser approaches a woman in rags. Her face is covered and she's hunched over.
Curses, curses and more curses, what shall I do?
What happened?
Such a kind voice.
The woman straightens up and turns to Abuser. She removes her hood, tears fill her eyes.
I thought I'd reached my end.
It's alright, don't worry.
My name is Teresa. Can you help me? I've got a bad leg and my walking stick broke. My home's not too far from here. With your strong shoulders, I think we could make it.
Abuser pauses and looks at the log, then back to Trice, unsure if he should help. Trice stares at him with her mesmerizing eyes. Abuser offers his hand. Trice stands with a grimace.
It's just this way.
Trice flings her arm round Abuser and the pair walk off screen. Hold on the empty log for a moment. Exterior wooded dirt path. Day. The path that Abuser walked, empty. Exterior open woods. Day. The pair hovel along, pained and slow.
You live in these woods?
I do. And what's a handsome man like you doing, walking alone through the forest?
I lost my steed to one of the poisoned.
Have to be careful out here in the wilds. That song you were whistling, such an ancient melody.
My mother used to hum it to me.
Words go along with it, in a forgotten tongue.
Really, I didn't know.
Hum it and I'll show you.
Abuser hums.
Zu, ze, lorm, gassen quay. Kua, mu, san, saran, cheese.
Trice sings a chorus and a verse. Abuser's eyes droop a little. He looks over at his companion. She looks at him and smiles shyly. Exterior cave. Continuous. They reach the cave.
Come inside with me and I'll give you a reward for your kindness.
She takes Abuser by the hand and walks backwards toward the cave. Her leg doesn't seem to hurt anymore. Interior cave. Day. Trice grins at Abuser, who squints in the darkness. On the bed, Ein rests with Alessa's book on his face. Alessa's corpse lays next to the wall, a steady drip of green water hitting her face.
What is that?
Trice glances at Alessa's body.
Oh, don't mind that, just a doll. A simple, lifeless doll.
Trice moves her hand inches from Abuser's face and makes a circular motion. His head wanes and he goes limp. Trice kneels down and cuts a hole along the leg of his pants, revealing the inner thigh. Trice bites down on the vein along his leg. Abuser arches forward in pain, but Trice puts up her hand and punctures the center of his throat with her sharp thumbnail. Trice stares at Ein.
Won't you join me, my love?
Ein takes the book off his face and looks at Trice, then turns onto his side. The blood from his wounded neck still flows. Trice gives Ein an annoyed glare, then turns back to her victim. She stands and drinks from the wound on his neck. The sound of the dripping water changes, no longer hitting Alessa's skin. Ein looks at the blanket, then holds the book in front of him, stares intently at it. Inside is strange writing and a picture of the egg. Trice sucks deeply and thrusts her head back, mouth bloodied, ecstasy on her face. She moves in for another bite when a hand grabs her from the back of her head, fingers locked in at the top of the eye sockets. Using this hold, Alessa flings her arm down, sending Trice to the floor. Trice twists her body, breaking free and rolling several feet. Ein looks up from the book, guilt-ridden, at Trice, then at Alessa. The reanimated corpse of Alessa snarls at Trice. Her eyes are still bloodied, her skin is pale, her neck remains twisted from Trice breaking it. Ein doesn't move. Trice looks to Ein and realizes he's not going to help her. She scowls at him, then turns to Alessa and charges with a yell, arms at either side, nails ready to cut. Trice reaches Alessa and swipes across with both arms. Alessa leans back in a dodge, then sends a hand to Trice's throat. Trice gasps, surprised at the hand round her neck. Trice kicks Alessa in the gut twice and leverages her foot against Alessa's stomach, making Alessa fall backwards onto the ground, but Alessa's grip remains firm. With Alessa on the ground, Trice pummels her, to no avail. Trice turns to Ein again.
Ein, help me.
Alessa sits up and brings Trice close, then bites into Trice's neck. As Trice's cursed blood flows into her, Alessa's neck pops back into place. Her eyes open, showing reformed eyeballs which have now turned red. Trice struggles for a moment, then faints. This stirs Ein.
Wait, stop.
Alessa looks with her new-formed eyes at Ein. She takes one more long suck from Trice, then stands up. She holds the limp body for a moment, then drops Trice to the ground.
Please, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for any of this.
Alessa comes in close to Ein, who shields his face with his hand. Alessa grabs the hand and bites down into the wrist. Ein grimaces and falls to his knees.
The egg.
Alessa pauses. She lets go of Ein's wrist and looks at him, quizzical.
I know what you are. I know why you sent Alessa here. Oh great Theophin.
Ein leans his forehead on Alessa's possessed corpse, on Theophin. Theophin cradles Ein's head in her arms. She caresses Ein's hair, then she shrieks and digs her fingers into the open wound on Ein's neck and tears and twists his head till half the neck is ripped open. Ein's body slinks down to the ground. Theophin heaves and wipes her mouth, then notices Alessa's blade by the bed. She picks it up and turns around to stare at Trice. She walks toward Trice when something catches her eye. The necklace and broken egg. She drops the blade and walks to the egg, picks it up and studies it in a somber daze. Theophin then examines her hands as she realizes whose body she has possessed. She leans against the wall, sinks down and stares blankly. Trice coughs and comes to. Theophin watches without moving. Trice sits up and leans against the opposite wall. Trice stares at Ein's dead body. Her face remains cold, but tears begin to form in her eyes. She slowly turns to look at Theophin. The two stare at each other for a while. The ambience of the cave fills the air. Trice goes for the blade. Theophin doesn't react. Trice snatches it and charges at Theophin. She reaches her, but when the blade comes within inches of Theophin's face, it stops. Trice can't do it. She tries again. She can't do it. She pushes with all her might and lets out a primal scream. Suddenly, she grabs her neck in pain where Theophin bit her. The murderous intent that fills her is met with unimaginable pain. Trice falls down and writhes on the ground.
You mustn't attempt to harm me, my child.
Trice clenches her teeth and glares at Theophan, realizing she has become a servant to this creature. She grabs the blade, then stands. She looks down at the blade and contemplates attacking again. Instead, she throws it to the ground, turns around, and walks away.
Stay.
Trice pauses, frozen.
Do not leave.
Trice straightens her back and leaves. Exterior cave. Late afternoon. Trice steps outside and covers her face from the sunlight. She takes a few steps forward, then clutches her stomach in pain. She looks back into the cave, understanding that this pain is a result of disobedience to the creature. She lets out a gasp and turns away from the cave, determined not to give in. She takes a few excruciating steps, then stands up straight and continues walking. Exterior forest hill near cave. Late afternoon. Trice pushes forward in agony. She reaches the top of the hill. Suddenly her neck starts to bleed where she was bitten. She clutches it with her hand and coughs up blood. She keeps walking and navigates down the hill. Her leg gives out. Exterior dried river bed near cave. Continuous. Trice rolls down the hill and lays on the ground. Blood drips from her eyes. She reaches a hand up toward the sky and arches her back in torment. Her body hardens, a look of suffering fixed on her face. She goes limp. The forest sits in silence. A bird chirps, bugs hum and buzz. The sun sets. Exterior dried river bed near cave. Sunset. A stream of rocks tumbles down the hill. Theophan follows after the rocks, reaches the body, leans over it. She looks concerned. She hears a sound, then looks up and sees one of the poisoned creatures. Theophan eyes it, then picks up Trice's limp body and walks backwards, eyes still locked with the creature. She turns around and walks up the hill. Interior cave. Night, full moon. Torches light the cave. Ein's body lays on the table, a blanket covering him. Next to the corpse sits the contents of Theophan's bag, book, pictures, stirring rod, knife. Abuser has disappeared. Theophan drops Trice onto the bed and wheezes, unable to catch her breath. She goes to the wall and licks the moisture on the rock. She looks up at the green water drops and opens her mouth, drip drip drip. This gives her strength and slows her breathing. She goes to the table, then takes the knife and cuts her thumb, dripping some blood into one of the vases. In the other vase she collects the green water as well as black dirt where the egg broke. She spits in the vase with the blood, then pours the contents of the other vase into it and mixes this concoction with the blue stirring rod. She dips her thumb in the mixture and licks it. The wound has healed. Theophan walks over to Trice and opens her mouth, pouring the liquid down her throat. Trice coughs. Theophan sits at the edge of the bed holding her knees up to her face, staring at Trice. Trice comes to. She sees Theophan and breathes heavy, like a scared rabbit, eyeing her up and down. Theophan doesn't move. Trice's breathing slows. Theophan crawls toward Trice. Trice doesn't react. Theophan leans in and kisses Trice's forehead, then lays her head on Trice's chest and looks at Ein's corpse.
Such an unsightly deed. It is not in my nature to kill.
Trice looks down at Theophan.
Ein. My love.
I shall return this life I have taken. This I pledge to you.
A beat.
What do you call yourself?
What?
Your name.
Trice.
A beat.
What do you call yourself?
Theophan looks down.
I had a name once, Ian spoke it to her yet. When I killed him I felt a sort of love, a sort of pity. In this place I find myself now, you all seem as one to me. Yet in the flow of time you do not see it.
Theophan lifts her head from Trice's chest and looks her in the eye for a beat before touching her face. Trice looks away. Theophan lays her head back down.
At the northern edge of the forest, beyond the dried riverbed, across a wide field, lies an old tree. There you will find a chest. Bring it to me and I shall save your love.
Trice reaches down to Theophan. Theophan sits up. Trice puts her hands around Theophan's neck. Squeezes. Theophan smiles as Trice chokes her. Trice seizes. Theophan lowers Trice's hands and kisses her palms. She smiles and stands, then walks over to Ain's body.
If we do not make haste, his soul will have gone beyond my reach.
You must think me a fool to be taken in by this facade. I do not bow to your will or schemes.
Theophan looks at Trice, their form contorts and they speak in an eerie voice.
Then you serve no purpose, Trice. Kill yourself.
Trice's hands shake as they turn on their owner. Theophan lifts the blade from the table and walks over to Trice. She grabs her hand and puts the blade in it. Trice's hand shakes, the blade twists towards the facial space under her chin. She stops it with her other hand, the blade presses into the soft flesh. Trice lets out a cry. Trice manages to bring the blade down a little, yet it still points up.
Trice, oh my poor lost soul, I care for you. I pity you.
Trice looks at Theophan and smiles with a bloodied cough. Trice looks down at the blade and yells as she thrusts it upwards towards her chin.
Stop.
The blade reaches the flesh and stops. A single drop of blood flows down the blade.
Drop the blade.
Trice does so and falls back onto the bed, smiling.
As you wish, you have my fealty.
Then we must make haste.
Theophan cuts her wrist and holds it out.
Drink of me, take of my strength for your journey.
Trice stands and walks to Theophan. She takes Theophan's wrist, brings it up to her mouth and sucks deeply. Theophan's eyes roll back in her head. As Trice sucks, she comes in close to Theophan's face and smiles. Theophan looks at her with a cold expression, somber, serious. Trice looks away, then looks back. Her smile fades. Exterior Forest Hill. Night, full moon. The moon looks down full and bright in the lightning sky of near dawn. Theophan and Trice walk up the hill. Trice is holding a staff and has a sack strung round her shoulder.
Ain told me Alessa was looking for an emerald spring.
Theophan doesn't say anything.
It's nearby here. It's said the magic of those waters can resurrect the dead.
The words are hard to say with Ain dead.
My love and I supped from them many times.
Return to me before the moon after next reaches the height of the sky.
Or shall your parasitic soul depart this corpse?
Theophan gives a coy tilt of her head. Trice sees an opening.
Is this kindness a mere charade masking a desire for me? You wouldn't be the first.
Trice kisses Theophan on the lips.
Or has the yearning fleshly pleasure abandoned you, corpse?
Theophan doesn't react. She just turns and walks away. Trice watches with malice. Exterior wooded path. Night, full moon. Trice journeys along the way that she walked with Abuser earlier, holding the staff. Exterior wood log. Early morning. Trice walks out of the woods and arrives at the log. Her broken cane still sits where she left it. She sits on the log and dusts off her clothing, then glances either way down the path. Trice lets out a small laugh that turns to sorrow as it escapes her lips. The tears begin to overwhelm her as she thinks about Ain. Before the emotion takes over, she slaps herself across the face and stands. She picks up the broken old cane and tosses it into the woods. Montage. Day. Music starts to play. We cut back and forth between Theophan and Trice. Trice walks down the path. Wood log. Theophan wipes down the nude body of Ain, collecting sweat, squeezing it in one of the vases. Int. Cave. Trice crosses the log that Ain and Theophan crossed. Forest brook. Theophan drags Ain out of the cave. Ext. Cave. Trice navigates a rocky area and then through a grove of mushrooms. Theophan digs a shallow hole for Ain's body with a wooden shovel. Ext. Grave. Trice arrives at the hanging tree. The cut rope is still there. She eyes it for a moment. Theophan has a stack of wood and lines the grave with it. She pushes the body into the hole. It lands, face up. Trice navigates her way down the forest hill, then through thin woods. Theophan, using the blade, finishes cutting off Ein's head. She wipes her forehead with her bloodied hand. She looks up at the sun in the sky. Late afternoon. Exterior riverbed. Late afternoon. Trice arrives at the riverbed and sits down.
Abuser.
Trice sits up, looks around.
Abuser.
Trice doesn't move. Several moments pass.
Abuser.
Trice sits up with caution and looks toward the voices. Silence. She sighs. They're gone. We see a snake slithering toward her. She notices it and smiles.
Hello, old serpent. Are you lost? Or is your home nearby?
The snake crawls on her leg and looks at her.
I'm far from my home. It's been invaded by a fiend who murdered my love. Ein.
She feels surprised that saying that makes her so emotional. The snake looks around.
It seems its power may even now be waning. Even if I cannot kill it, I could escape this cursed place. Spend my days alone, an old hag.
She lets the serpent slither onto her hand.
Perhaps the water's curse would subside. Perhaps Ein was.
Trice looks up from the serpent to the way she needs to go and thinks about Ein. Interior cave. A few days prior, Alessa's corpse lays on the ground, green water from the cave wall dripping on her face. Ein sits next to her reading the book of flesh. Trice enters, holding a dead rat, notes that Ein's neck is still bleeding. She sucks on the rat's belly and tosses it aside and studies Ein, who seems dour.
You return with such a gift yet fall into the same melancholy as before.
She walks over and tries to drink from Alessa's wounds. When she does this, she unknowingly turns Alessa's body so the green water is dripping closer to her mouth. Trice spits out the blood which has gone bad and looks at Ein.
You shouldn't have come back.
What good would it do to run from here, to run from you, Trice? I cannot escape this hunger.
And would you have preferred death to the gift of the forest?
Ein ignores the question.
It was a mistake to take pity on you that day.
Have I not taken pity on you?
You hate me for saving you. You see me as. You don't see me as a lover. I love you and you do not love me.
Ein studies the book of flesh. Trice looks down at the dead body. She knows Ein is studying the book driven by his feelings for Alessa. Trice scoffs.
She was a fool like you. No wonder you had feelings for her. Yet it was not enough to stop you.
Ein ignores Trice and continues to read.
Did you think I'd take her in? That we'd found another soul to share in this torment?
Tears well up in Ein's eyes.
I thought. Maybe she could.
Emotion overwhelms Ein and he can't say the next part.
You fool.
Ein collects himself and stares back at the book. His eyes are red from crying.
I am a fool, for we do not deserve salvation.
Trice snatches the book and looks at it. Inside is a drawing of Theophan. Trice studies it, not knowing who it is. She sits next to Ein, then glances at the writing but can't make out the words. She flings the book against the cave wall, then rests her head on Ein's shoulder. Exterior riverbed. Present. Trice contemplates Ein's words. She sets the serpent on the ground and watches it slither away, then looks up at the sky in thought. Exterior field. Golden hour. Trice walks through the field. She pauses, looks forward, north. Then she looks east. She could leave, abandon this fool's errand. She starts to walk east. But then Trice pauses. She looks over her shoulder, north again. Exterior ancient grove. Dusk. The tree is twisted and ancient. Trice stands before it. She notices the disturbed dirt and digs with her hands. She pulls out the chest and opens it, then picks up a vial and examines it, then a medallion. Trice shoots an annoyed look at the box and slams it shut. Trice takes a rope from her bag and ties it to the handle on the side of the chest. She flings it over her shoulder. Exterior dried riverbed. Late dusk. The last light of the sky ebbs into night. Trice makes her way along the riverbed. She stops. 3 of the poisoned creatures sit in the middle of the path. Trice starts to back away. One of the creatures notices Trice and lets out a shriek. The other two notice Trice as well. All three start to move in. Trice drops the chest and steps atop it. This doesn't deter the creatures. Trice holds up the staff and lets out a loud shout. The creatures stop. Trice begins to sing, in a bold booming voice.
Within the hollow zephyr and through the drows, under the rocks and tresses, this fair soul shall venture and go forth, for thou shalt not place harm upon my head.
Trice turns the staff horizontal and holds it forward. The creatures sit and stare at Trice. Trice closes her eyes. Time passes. Night falls. Trice's arms begin to shake. She opens her eyes. The creatures haven't moved. Trice grimaces and closes her eyes. Exterior dried riverbed. Late night. Trice opens her eyes again. The creatures start to move closer. Trice hits the metallic handle on the chest. A loud clank echoes through the trees, sending the creatures back a little. Sensing Trice's desperation, one of the creatures starts to move in again. Trice shouts at it. There's a silence. It creeps closer. She readies for an attack. The creature stops and runs away, along with the other two. Trice turns around. Another creature, a big one, charges at her. She jabs it in the face with the staff, sending it onto its back. Trice jumps off the chest and brings the staff downward. The creature rolls out of the way. It swipes down at Trice, who holds the staff horizontal to block. The creature's claws cut through the wood and slice into the muscle on Trice's left arm. The creature jumps on her, going for her throat. It stops. Trice has jammed the broken staff into the creature's heart. The creature lets out a pained cry and falls on Trice. The forest sits in silence for a moment before Trice pushes the creature off. Dark green blood spills all over her. She tries to catch her breath, but the scent of the dark green blood makes her retch and squirm. She wipes her hands with dirt and takes off the top layer of her upper clothes and picks up the chest. She swings it over her shoulder. She continues on, her hurt arm hanging down. Exterior forest path. Morning overcast. The sky lightens over the forest path. Trice trudges along, her left arm bloodied and useless. She lets the chest drop and examines the wound. She glances at the surrounding tree tops. Angry and annoyed, she thinks for a second. She opens the chest. Trice pulls out a vial of strange liquid, pops off the cork cap. Smells it, nothing. Puts the cap back on, digs through the chest, finds another vial, takes off the cap, smells it. Vial smell, that's good. Trice dips a finger in and tastes the liquid, spits it out, digs through the chest. She finds an empty vial.
Fuck.
Trice drops the vial and slams the chest shut, then stands up and yanks it back over her shoulder. It opens and the contents of the chest scatter on the path. Trice puts her hand to her mouth and takes a deep breath, trying not to get more upset. She picks up some of the contents, then comes across the empty vial again.
Fuck.
Trice throws the vial against a tree and it shatters.
Iboza. Is that you?
Trice goes wide-eyed and picks up the rest of the contents of the chest and rushes off the path. Exterior forest path. Continuous. A moment passes. A group of 6 rough-looking individuals approach the spot where Trice just was.
I heard it, I swear.
The group looks around for a moment, then keeps moving down the path. Except for one, Sasha, he's looking at the cork cap on the ground. He bends down and snatches it. The others have already moved on. Sasha notes the glass shards by the tree. He looks at the thicket.
Don't bother running, I know you're there.
The rest of the group turn around.
Come on, Ibozer, we don't have any hard feelings towards you.
There's a moment of silence. The group look at the woods and among themselves.
Oh my goodness gracious me. I thought you were more of those creatures.
Trice hovels out of the thicket. Her face has morphed and looks old and haggard. She doesn't have the knapsack or chest.
I got lost in these woods, you see. And then night fell and I was attacked by one of the poisoned creatures of the forest.
Oh, you poor old thing. How did you manage to survive?
I was able to get it a good smacking on the head and that riled it up a bit. It knew to stay away after that.
Well, you'll have quite the story once you get back to the village. That is where you came from?
Yes, yes, now which way is it? I've gotten all turned around in these woods.
You're lucky, we're near the northern edge of the wood. Just follow the path that way for a few miles and take a left at the fork. Follow that and you should be out in no time.
A left at the fork?
That's right, a left at the fork. Perhaps one of my kind companions should accompany you?
That's all right, I can manage.
That's smart of you, real smart. I wouldn't trust a bunch of strangers either. So how about we have a little introduction? I'm Sasha, at your service.
Sasha motions to the group.
Danton.
Sea Eyes.
Kalen.
Asher. Tevel.
So, now that we're all friends, who would you like to take you back?
Trice looks at them. They attempt to appear trustworthy, but that just makes it worse.
I can manage. Besides, you all need to find your friend.
Yes. Very true. Well, do you need any food or drink to keep you going?
I snagged a few berries just a little while ago.
All right, well, we best be on our way.
Sasha signals for the group to come over. The 5 men surround Trice.
Back into the forest now, we need to find our friend.
The group continues down the path. Sasha turns to the group but addresses Trice.
Say, you haven't seen our friend Ibuzer, have you?
What does? Ibuzer?
Yeah, that's right.
What does Ibuzer look like?
Kind of scrawny, short brown hair, biggish nose. Even you could probably take him. Anything come to mind?
Can't say it does.
Sasha gives Trice an intense stare.
All right.
The group walks away. Trice watches them go. Sasha walks a few paces then stops.
Hold up a second.
The group stops and turns around.
You know, there's a rumor going around that a monster lives in these woods, one that masquerades as an elder.
Sasha turns around and looks at Trice.
It's said this monster.
The group reaches Sasha. All 6 joined up.
Lures unsuspecting travelers to a cave.
The group advances on Trice.
Weird feasts on them.
Sasha makes a signal with his hand. Danton, Size, and Callan rush Trice. Danton, knife drawn, charges first. Trice grabs his wrist and spins Danton around, then pushes the knife up into his throat and shoves him forward into Size. Size pushes Danton aside and makes a grab for Trice, but Trice dodges and punches the back of Size's head and he falls to his knees behind Trice. Before Trice can react, Callan closes in and grabs Trice's hurt arm then squeezes it hard. Trice lets out a cry and tries to bite Callan. Asher grabs Trice by the hair before Trice can bite and brings her to the ground. Size and Asher hold Trice down. Tavel closes in and punches Trice in the face several times, breaking her nose.
Get off of her. Come on now, let's be civil.
Tavel gets off. Trice struggles to get up but Size holds her down by the shoulders. Sasha looks at Danton with the knife in his throat, about to pull it out.
Danton, don't pull it out.
Danton pulls it out, blood squirts, he drops the knife and grabs his throat, faints. Sasha sighs, then walks to Trice and leans over.
Monster or not, looks like we have a murderer on our hands. You know what we do with murderers?
Trice spits blood at Sasha, who wipes it off his face.
We string them up, by the neck.
A hangman's rope, held by Tavel, gets slung around Trice's neck and yanked hard. Tavel drags Trice, choking, to the tree that Trice threw the vial at earlier. Tavel tosses the rope around a thick branch and pulls Trice up off the ground a little. Trice kicks and pulls on the rope round her neck with her good arm. Sasha checks on Danton, shakes his head and picks up the knife, then motions to Asher who helps Tavel pull Trice higher. She's still conscious, kicking desperately. With Danton's knife, Sasha stabs Trice in the chest. He leaves the knife embedded and nods to Tavel and Asher who pull on the rope once more, lifting Trice higher. Trice gives a final gasp then goes limp. Tavel carries Danton over to Asher and ties the rope around the body as a counterweight.
Search the area, It might have hidden Ibuzer's body nearby.
The group spreads out into the woods. Sasha walks over to Trice, checks her pockets for gold, nothing. He pushes the body, watches it swing. He takes out some meat and chews on it. Trice excretes her bladder. Sasha grimaces and spits out the meat. Exterior nearby. Thicket. Continuous. Callan scans the area and spots the chest.
I found something.
Exterior forest path. Early afternoon. The group walks off, with the chest, heading south. They disappear into the distance. Trice swings motionless. Her wetted leggings drip urine onto the ground, forming a small puddle. After a long beat, Trice's eyes open. With her good arm, Trice pulls her mouth up to the rope and tries to gnaw on it. She gets a chunk off but cuts her gums in the process. Her arm gives out and she falls, yanking her neck again. She loses consciousness. Exterior forest path. Later, Trice opens her eyes and lets out a gurgled rasp. Trice, wheezing a little, pulls on the knot to loosen it but to no avail. Her arm slides down as she loses consciousness again. Suddenly she feels the knife in her chest. Trice braces for the pain. She pulls out the knife. Struggling to stay awake, she works on cutting the rope but begins to slip away again. The knife slides out of her hand and falls to the ground. Trice grits her teeth and lets out a muffled yell. She grabs the rope and pulls herself up again, then bites the rope. Blood flows from her mouth. Her eyes flutter and she falls again. She hangs for a second before the rope snaps and she hits the ground with a thud. Her body is motionless for a beat before she sits up, wheezing. Trice scans the ground for the knife, grabs it, cuts the cord round her neck. She looks over to Danton's corpse. With pain she crawls over to Danton and feeds. After a beat, she stands and examines her arm. She rolls her shoulder, testing the range of her fingers. She lifts Danton by the head and smiles, then flings him aside and glances up at the cut rope. Exterior hanging tree. Mid-afternoon. Ein's cut rope still hangs from the tree. Tavel stares at it.
It's a bloody shame about Danton. Feels wrong to leave him there.
Sasha chews and slices some meat while sitting on the chest. He grimaces at Tavel and spits.
Danton knew what the job entailed.
He cuts another piece of meat.
Not my fault Danton couldn't follow orders. I told him, I said Danton.
Sasha chews the meat.
Don't pull the knife out.
Sasha shrugs. Tavel is depressed. The other members of the group come back from searching the area. Callan argues with Size and Asher about the chest.
No, I'm not gonna listen to this anymore. You just wanna take all my stuff, and, you know what I think? It's a damn plot. That's what I think.
Stop talking nonsense.
Just toss it. No sense lugging an empty box round with you.
I found it. I'm gonna use it. Fine wood like that. Excellent craftsmanship.
It's broken. That's not very fine.
It's not the chest's fault that someone mistreated it.
Someone with severe anger issues, I'd say.
Yeah, a very unhappy person.
Anyway, it's trash, beyond repair.
Did you find any sign of Ibuzer?
The three ignore Sasha.
I could sell it.
Who'd want a broken box?
I'll fix it.
With what?
Do you know how to fix chests?
I could learn and then sell it.
That is it. We're gonna leave the box here.
All three look at Sasha surprised.
Now then, did you find anything?
Nope, just an empty nest of some of those poison monsters.
Maybe they got Ibuzer.
Close up on Sasha's face as he looks around the woods. Exterior grave site. Late afternoon overcast. Theophan meditates at the foot of the grave. Ein's head sits at the head of the grave, eyes closed. The forest grows silent.
Alessa, you must trust me. Do not give in to your anger towards these poor souls.
She listens and furrows her eyebrows a little.
I shall not abandon you, Alessa.
Silence.
When the time comes and my spirit has left your vessel, fulfill my promise that I may return to this world unfettered by fate.
More silence. Theophan looks up to the sky. A long beat. We drift behind her head.
Oh, you've come back. Did you get what I asked?
Theophan stands, then turns and smiles. Exterior silent forest. Near dusk. Callan and Tavel are looking for Abuser.
You know, I think Sasha was a bit quick to leave Danton like that.
What do you mean?
Well, it's not like there's that much gold to go around, and I wonder if Sasha might not want to be splitting it 6 ways so.
6 ways.
Well, 5 ways.
Yes, and if I were to kill you here I'd get that much more of the loot once we find Ibiza.
Don't be careless, Kellen.
If you keep on with your pithy attitude I just might. I've got debts, Tavel.
Tavel plays with some sticks on the ground.
I'm not being pithy.
Listen to me, Tavel. Are you listening? Danton wouldn't have made it.
But to leave him like that, barely passed on.
Danton was not going to make it.
Callan sighs.
It wouldn't have mattered what we'd done, carried him back to town on a silver platter, straight to a leech to straddle his skin back together.
It just feels wrong to me.
Tavel leans against a tree and takes out a canteen.
If you knew Danton like I did you wouldn't be talking about right and wrong.
Tavel drinks heartily from the canteen.
Better take it easy on that, can't refill it till we get out of these woods.
Tavel eyes the water. A wistful look fills his face as he puts the cap back on. He sighs and sinks down to the ground.
My feet hurt.
A beat.
Fine, I'll just check over that ridge then we'll head back.
Why don't you just sit here for a minute? It's a nice day. You gotta appreciate the little moments. The stuff in between, that's what really matters in the end.
Callan pauses then nods in agreement before he gives Tavel a harsh kick and walks off. Tavel sighs and rubs his leg. He looks up at the ridge. Callan has disappeared. Tavel takes the canteen out and drinks it all down, then groans and gets up. As he trudges forward a figure emerges from the ridge. A cape covers the beautiful creature's bloodied clothes. She has a full knapsack strung round her shoulder. The figure approaches.
Excuse me, I'm a bit lost.
Tavel doesn't recognize the younger version of Trice as she comes in close.
You look like you know your way around this wood.
Trice kisses Tavel on the lips. Tavel drops to his knees. Trice presses her chin to Tavel's forehead to get him on his back. She continues to kiss Tavel, then bites his neck. This causes Tavel to freeze up. Trice sticks out her tongue and cuts it, then she goes back down and keeps kissing Tavel, who swallows some of Trice's blood. Tavel pushes Trice off then runs up to the ridge and looks down. Callan's corpse lays at the bottom, throat cut.
Stop.
Tavel stops. He's gone pale and looks stunned.
Turn around.
Tavel does so. Death fills his face, cold and pale. Exterior hanging tree. Dusk. Sighs and Asher are working on making a fire. Sasha sits on the chest holding a pipe. Asher stands up and looks around.
Tavel and Callan should have been back by now.
Maybe they found Ibuzor.
Asher walks back and leans down to look at the fire situation.
Maybe they found something else.
Asher looks up and sees Tavel. He stands and runs towards him. Sasha watches. As Asher gets closer he slows and goes white. Tavel looks like a standing corpse. He has dried blood on his neck. Sighs, glances up, doesn't notice Tavel's face. He looks back down and hits the flint hard. It makes a spark and the fire starts to crackle. Sighs blows on it, a healthy fire. Asher and Tavel stare at each other. Sighs smiles and looks up.
You find anything out there?
Tavel lurches at Asher, knocking him backwards. Sasha and a shocked Sighs both stand. Tavel rips out Asher's throat.
What the hell, Tavel?
Sighs rushes over and tries to break up the fight. Tavel lets go of Asher's bloodied throat and bites off 3 of Sighs' fingers. Sighs recoils, falling backwards onto his back. Tavel spits out the fingers with a snarl. Sasha puts his pipe away and removes a saber from his cloak, then approaches Tavel and Asher. Tavel looks back down to Asher underneath him. Asher chokes and gurgles up blood. Tavel leans down and takes another chomp from Asher's throat, then looks up at Sighs, who starts to sit up. Tavel starts to lunge at Sighs, but Sasha pierces him through the back with his saber, running both Tavel and Asher through. There's a moment of silence. Sasha pulls the sword out. He kicks Tavel to the side and looks at Asher. He is dead. Sasha glances over to Tavel with a hardened look, then wipes his sword off using his cape before he sheaths it. He takes out his pipe again and walks to the fire. Sasha glances at Sighs, still on the ground, whimpering and holding his hand.
Wrap that up.
Sighs sniffs in tears and stands, filled with anger. He kicks Tavel's corpse. Sasha grabs a small stick out of the flame and lights his pipe, then warms his hands as he inhales the smoke.
You stupid bastard.
Sighs stops kicking and heaves. He gives Tavel one more hard kick when suddenly a knife flies out of the forest, piercing deep into Sighs' forehead. Sasha exhales smoke as Trice approaches. Sasha stands up, tosses the stick into the fire, and puffs on his pipe. Trice pulls Danton's knife out of Sighs' head. She stares at Sasha.
I suppose you want your box back?
Trice gives Sasha a death glare. Exterior gravesite. Evening. Ein's headless body lays in the open grave. Nearby Theophan and Abuser stand next to a cloth with tools and an Iron Maiden head on it. Theophan is holding Ein's head. She puts Ein's head in an Iron Maiden head with a funnel-like slot on the top and closes it shut with a crunch. She then takes a crank with a sharp tip and shoves it into the slot and turns it. After a few turns she pulls it out.
Start the flame for the cauldron, Abuser.
Abuser goes off to do the task. Theophan hears a sound and looks around.
You cut off his head.
Theophan turns around and sees Trice standing by the grave looking at Ein.
A necessity, for if the death of the body spreads to the mind and the soul departs, it can never return.
And what have you done with his head?
Theophan looks at the Iron Maiden head. She walks over and picks it up.
Come.
Theophan walks toward the cave. Exterior cave. Early night. There's a fire roaring outside the cave with a cauldron of boiling water atop it. Theophan has the table outside with the Iron Maiden head on it, as well as some glass vials and chemistry equipment and the Book of Flesh. Abuser is holding one of the vases above the cauldron. Theophan prepares some powder, then adds liquid from one of the vials to it.
Abuser, has the sweat of the body begun to boil?
Yes.
Set it on the table.
Abuser obeys. Theophan nods, then adds the powdery liquid to the vase with Ein's sweat in it. This causes a hissing sound. Theophan then stirs the liquid and puts it in the other vase and pours the mixture into the Iron Maiden. Theophan takes a ladle and collects some of the boiling water. She pours it into a separate bowl with some powder in it. This produces smoke. Theophan picks up the Iron Maiden, then plops it into the boiling water. She nods at Abuser, indicating she can handle the next part as she goes back to working at the table. Trice leans on a tree and looks at Abuser, who sits down near the entrance of the cave. She goes and sits next to him, then offers him Sasha's meat.
Thank you.
Hey, sorry about that business earlier.
No hard feelings.
Abuser cuts off a slice of meat with a small knife.
I came across your friends. They think you ran off with the gold, Abuser. They were looking to kill you.
That figures. What did you do with them?
I killed them.
Abuser doesn't react.
So you think you should get some coin now?
Trice touches her neck and glances at him, then at Theophan.
Did that creature mark you as well?
Mark me. No. Theophan saved me.
Trice looks at Abuser.
Well, now isn't that funny? Theophan saved you from me and I saved you from your friends. It seems you just keep collecting debts, Abuser.
Once I've fulfilled my duty to Theophan, I'll give you half of the gold, then we're even.
I'll think about it, if that's what I wish from you.
Theophan uses a metal rod to hook onto the head and pull it out of the boiling water. She places the hot Iron Maiden head on the table and adds some powder and pink liquid to it. Then she lifts the head and puts it back in the pot. She pours a bowl of powder into the boiling water itself. This causes a hiss. She takes the two pitchers and dips them into the boiling water and carries them over to Abuser and Trice, who stand up.
Each of you take one and spit in it.
They look at each other, then both spit. Theophan takes out 2 small pieces of parchment.
Now walk slowly to the grave and repeat this enchantment. After each repetition, spit into the pitcher. Once you reach the grave, Trice will pour her pitcher on the neck of the corpse and you will pour yours at his feet, one after the other.
Trice sighs and looks at the paper, then recites the incantation, walks, and spits. Abuser does the same. Theophan returns to work. Exterior cave. Later. Theophan is using a mortar and pestle to crush some herbs. She winces in pain, then looks up to make sure she's alone. She finishes crushing the herbs and adds them to the boiling water. She looks at the book of flesh and flips to a page marked with the dried flower Ein picked for Alessa. She moves the dried flower to the side of the page and checks the text for a moment. Theophan removes the Iron Maiden head again, sets it on the table, extracts some white ooze containing Ein's soul from the top. She scoops some of the water and puts it in a bowl and squeezes the white ooze into the bowl. She sets an empty vial next to the bowl. Theophan digs through the chest and takes out a vial of yellow liquid which has healing properties. She carefully sets it on the table for Alessa. She can feel that it's time. She takes a deep breath.
Alessa, I grow weak and Trice has brought the means to heal you.
Her body begins to seize. She can't maintain this form any longer.
Fulfill my promise, Alessa, my ways are no longer the ways of flesh. Do not give in to petty vengeance.
Theophan picks up the empty vial and leans over it, preparing to vomit. She opens her mouth wide, retches but doesn't move her head as the indigo ooze that contains her consciousness globs down from her mouth slowly into the vial. She quickly puts the cap on and tries to set the indigo vial on the table, but it falls from her hand. Alessa's corpse is wide-eyed, empty, frozen. It gives a sudden jerk, arching its back. Its face contorts as its head cranes backward. Its eyes roll back, going white. The corpse grabs its head with both hands. It squeezes and turns its head. There's a crack as it tries to keep the head in place. Blood flows from its eyes and neck. The wounds from Alessa's fight with Trice have returned. Alessa opens her eyes, pure white, half alive, half dead. With Theophan gone, Alessa uses her few seconds of consciousness to grab the yellow liquid Theophan set on the table for her. Her wrist is bleeding from where Ein cut it with her blade. She manages to snag the vial but falls to the ground. The yellow liquid falls as well. On the ground, Alessa scrounges for the vial, pops off the cap, drinks. This causes her to hyperventilate. Her neck contorts and pops back into place. Alessa, whose eyes have changed back to their original color, notices the vial of indigo ooze on the ground containing Theophan's soul. She takes it, then stands up with a struggle. She checks her wrist. The skin has healed. Alessa looks at the scene surrounding her, then holds up the indigo vial.
Theophan.
She looks at the vial and tears well up in her eyes. She opens it, then inhales, turns, and uses a copper syringe to collect the indigo ooze containing Theophan's soul.
Let me return you to life, Theophan.
She holds up the copper syringe and looks at the Iron Maiden head, determined. She pauses and turns, slow, noticing the dried flower on the book. She thinks about Ein, looks at the bowl with white liquid.
I showed you kindness and you betrayed me. You coward.
She makes her decision and puts the copper syringe to the top of the Iron Maiden. She pauses. This will kill Ein for good. This will resurrect Theophan in Ein's stead. This will go against Theophan's will. There's a long beat.
Theophan. You would cast our love aside, in the name of what? Your honor.
Alessa clenches her teeth. She squeezes, the indigo ooze starts to drip out. She stops, turns to the table and picks up the empty vial, then squeezes the indigo ooze containing Theophan's soul back into the vial instead. She hangs the vial round her neck with a string as she did with the indigo egg long ago.
In the end. Am I naught but your servant, Theophan?
Alessa takes a second syringe and collects the white ooze containing Ein's soul. She squeezes it into the Iron Maiden head. Exterior grave site. Dawn. Abuser and Trice pour the contents of the cauldron onto Ein's chest, a sort of dark sludge. Alessa puts the Iron Maiden on top of the sludge, then spreads a white powder over the grave. Alessa signals Trice, who proceeds to bury the body. Exterior grave site. Later, Alessa sits at the foot of the grave meditating. Abuser rests on the ground. Trice leans against a tree. Alessa opens her eyes.
Dig it up.
Trice comes over and unearths a white crystal egg. Trice looks at it, then at Alessa. Abuser walks over and looks at it.
It's an egg.
I take it we bring it to the spring now?
Alessa nods in a somber daze. Exterior woods leading to Emerald Cave. Day overcast. The group walks through woods. Melancholic music plays. Exterior Emerald Cave. EXT. Day. They arrive at the cave.
I will go alone from here.
Trice notices Alessa's eyes have changed color.
Is that an order, Theophan?
Alessa looks at Trice.
When I return it will be with Ein.
Alessa walks over to Trice, puts her hand on Trice's cheek. They stare into each other's eyes for a moment. Alessa goes into the cave. Abuser and Trice watch. Interior Emerald Cave. Day. Inside the cave there's a pool of water, about 5 feet deep. The cavern has a soft green glow about it. Alessa kneels in front of it. She removes the book of flesh from her knapsack as well as the vases before removing her cloak. She puts the egg in one vase, then collects some water in the other and stirs it with the rod. She opens the book, whispers an incantation.
Nakamatu inu adini adina akini, peruptu anar piner.
She pours the water into the vase with the egg in it and finishes the incantation.
Aban lamasai ulin uagig, archin tuorm.
Alessa sets the book down and steps into the water. She punctures the egg with her thumb, then lowers it into the water, pushing it into the muck at the bottom of the pool. She exits the water and kneels down on her cloak.
On tu archi agig ulin ulamasai aban napai anar peruptu akini adiner adini inu nakamatu.
Bubbles come up from the pool. Ein's head pops up, facing the ceiling. It sits there for a moment before the eyes open. Ein slowly emerges. From his POV he sees Alessa, still kneeling. She opens her eyes and looks at Ein. They both stare at each other, a mixture of love and betrayal. Ein notices a figure emerge from the shadow behind Alessa. His face starts to sink as he sees a sword being drawn. He reaches out his hand in a vain attempt to warn Alessa. She realizes there's something wrong. She draws her knife and tries to turn. Sasha's sword pierces her. Alessa lets out a gasp. Sasha pulls out the sword and swipes it through her neck, then kicks her to the ground. As she falls, her head disconnects from her body. Sasha picks up the cape, rolls Alessa off, then looks at Ein.
Are you Ein?
Ein stares at Alessa's corpse.
Trice sent me.
Ein doesn't move.
Don't worry, Ein. You can trust me. Name Sasha.
Ein, naked, stumbles out of the water and kneels down by Alessa. Sasha drapes the cape over Ein's shoulders.
Trice is waiting outside.
Sasha kneels down and takes off Alessa's boots.
Here, you get her shirt off. It'll be cold, but it's better than nothing.
Ein looks at Sasha, solemn and sad.
What's wrong? The way Trice tells it, you weren't exactly on good terms with that thing.
Ein looks back at Alessa, notices a vial filled with indigo ooze clutched to her chest.
Theophan.
Ein takes it, looks at it, then notices the vases and the book of flesh. Ein holds the vial to his chest and hangs his head.
What have you done, Alessa?
Ein slides the vial into a pocket in the cloak.
Hello? You alright, Ein?
Ein unbuttons Alessa's shirt. Exterior Emerald Cave. Day overcast. Ein and Sasha step into the light to see Trice, feeding on Abuser. Sasha draws his sword and points it at Trice.
What the hell, Trice?
Trice stands up and licks her lips.
Our good friend Abuser just told me where he hid your gold, Sasha.
Sasha takes a step towards Trice, sword still pointed.
Trice.
Trice ignores him and walks over to Ein.
Ein?
Trice stares at Ein for a moment.
That fool actually did it.
Trice laughs a little.
And you rewarded her with death.
Just what sort of immaculate plan do you think your friend had for us, Ein? You think that she would just forgive us after what we did? That she'd just go on her merry way?
Ein stares at Trice with cold eyes.
Anyway, it's done. Come, let us collect our reward.
Trice looks at Sasha.
Or would you rather be on your way?
Sasha puts his sword away.
And what if Abuser lied to you?
Trust me, He didn't.
Exterior wooded path. Day overcast. The group walks along the way that Trice and Abuser first met and sang together. Trice hums that ancient melody. Exterior wood log. Day overcast. Trice stops at the log.
Push it over.
Sasha moves the log a little. He kicks away some disturbed dirt, then dives down and uncovers a bag. Inside are gold coins. Trice smiles. Ein turns away from the scene and examines the vial.
Ein, help Sasha divvy it up. We're splitting it 3 ways.
Exterior wood log. Later, 3 piles of gold coins sit on the ground. Trice and Sasha kneel over it. Ein observes them, then walks a few feet down the path behind Sasha.
You know, with this coin I could buy a carriage, escort people through the dangerous wood here.
We could offer protection against the creatures.
And if 1 or 2 of the wealthy ones goes missing, who's to say?
Who's to say?
They both laugh. Sasha begins putting his share in the bag.
You know, we have only 1 pouch. I forgot mine back at the cave.
Well, just put it in your cape and you can carry it back. It's not too far.
How about you leave the bag with us? We've got more to carry.
But I've got further to go. I'm not staying in these woods alone past nightfall.
Stay with us then. Set out tomorrow.
It dawns on Sasha what's going on. Cautious and slow, he stands.
Yes, perhaps I will. We can divvy up tomorrow.
He readies his sword.
Ein.
Sasha spins around, drawing his sword, expecting Ein. Ein looks down at the Trice, then up to Sasha who's already charging him. Trice jumps in front of the sword right before it pierces Ein, getting stabbed in the stomach. Sasha and Trice lock eyes. Trice smiles and grabs the blade. Blood drips from her hands. Sasha pulls the sword out swiftly, slicing off 2 of Trice's fingers. Before Sasha can react, Trice moves in and bites down on his neck, bringing him to the ground. Sasha kicks and struggles to no avail. Trice comes up from feeding and looks at Ein, then the gold. Ein approaches the scene. Trice ignores him and shovels the coins into the bag. Trice glances at Sasha, who's still twitching.
Go on, I left plenty for you.
Ein doesn't move.
What? Coming back cured you of your hunger?
With her good hand Trice finishes putting the coins away. The blood has seeped into the bag. She looks at her injury. The skin has healed but her fingers are gone for good. She looks at Ein.
Fine, don't eat it, but I'm not feeding you when you're too weak to hunt.
Trice walks off with the bag in the direction of the cave.
Ungrateful idiot.
Ein follows. Exterior open woods. Day overcast. The pair walk in silence. Trice leads. Ein stares ahead, expressionless. Trice seems pleased but this shifts to unease, then resentment, then sadness, then back to a sort of melancholic happiness. Exterior. Cave. Dusk. They arrive back at the cave. Trice stops, looks up at the sky, sighs.
Listen, Ein, I'm sorry. I know I haven't treated you well, you just make me so mad sometimes and I can't help it.
There's emotion in her voice.
But I do love you. I did everything I could to get you back, so we could be together. I just wanted you to know that.
Ein doesn't look up. There's a long pause before Ein replies.
I love you too, Trice.
Trice walks into the cave. Ein gazes at the entrance. Interior cave. Evening. A single torch lights the cave. Trice tosses the bag on the dirt floor and lays on the bed. After a beat Ein comes in and rests beside her. Both face away from each other. Trice turns and faces Ein. She reaches out and holds him. Ein squeezes Trice's hand. They kiss. It's passionate. It's intimate. There's love there, mixed with the hatred only familiarity can bring.
I love you so much, Ein.
Interior cave. Later, the torch light grows dim. Trice and Ein sleep facing away from each other. Interior cave. Later, Ein wakes up, looks at the sleeping Trice. He holds out his hand to caress her but stops inches from her soft skin. He stands up and leaves the cave. Exterior cave. Night. Outside the moon is full. Ein looks up at it. He takes the vial containing Theophan's soul out of his cloak and examines it for a moment, holds it up to the sky. He pulls the cap off, looks back at the cave, then drinks it all down. A beat. He clenches his teeth and falls to his knees, then clutches his face in agony. His body shoots forward as he heaves. Ein's breathing slows and silence fills the air. Slow, head down, the body stands. It looks up with red eyes. Theophan smiles.